Okay, guys, I think we are now live. I want to welcome everybody to I think we're now in our third year, and I'm so proud of this. We've been doing this every week for 3 years now on Tuesdays at 10 o'clock Central, 8 a.m. Pacific, but it's Nomberg Law Live. And we have, as I like to say, interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. And I have Atlanta attorney Steven Lefkoff with me this afternoon or this morning. Good morning, Steve. How you doing, bud?
Hey, good morning, man. I'm doing well. How are you, Bernard?
Doing well, doing well. I see that you're outside and I'm a little jealous. We've got nothing but clouds, rain, and wind here. So it's on its way, by the way. So maybe we'll get finished in time. You won't get too wet. But I brought Steven on today because, for many reasons, I think he's a really interesting guy. He's got a great practice, and I'm going to let him tell us about it in a minute. But he has a really cool podcast, Lawyers with Lives, and we're going to get into that. And on Fridays, he does this great thing, and I love to see the responses from lawyers all over the country and probably other countries who are telling us what they're up to, and it has nothing to do with the practice of law, and that's what makes it so great. But before we jump into all those things, Stephen, tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice, and let's get going.
Sure, man. Well, I am a native Atlantan who was raised in Atlanta, and I now practice here in Atlanta after going to the University of Georgia School of Law. And my practice here is a fairly general business litigation practice. I do a lot of work actually with car companies, with dealers, finance, repair, auction, repo. Kind of provide general counsel for a lot of those businesses, and many of those are around the country. I have some fairly large corporate clients in other areas outside of Georgia where I do their Georgia work. So that's been very interesting. And then the other, I guess, half of the business or so that I'm about to announce, I'm not quite ready to announce it here, but next month will be a big step in that direction. But about half the practice is in coaching clients to represent themselves in small claims court. So cases where it doesn't pay to hire an attorney, or it's difficult for clients to even find an attorney that'll take a case, that's $5,000 or $6,000, let's say. They come to me, and on a flat fee basis, I coach them to represent themselves and how to do it, how to put your best foot forward, keeping your emotions in check, what's hearsay, opening statements, closing arguments, where to sit, what to wear, you name it, it runs the gamut. So that, I can't guarantee a victory in court, but I can at least help them do the best job that they can. And that's become a bigger part of the practice. And it's about to become a separate, well, I'll reveal a little bit, a separate business in and of itself.
Sure. No, it sounds interesting because it's so intimidating for individuals who've never been in court, are not legally trained, but they have a genuine legal issue that they need to have a judge take a look at and make a ruling on, good, bad, or indifferent. And there's countless situations I can think of. A bad car repair, bad work done on a home, or just two immediate things. How about selling an item that's been misrepresented, that it was supposed to work and it doesn't work? I mean, but you're right, the dollar figure may not reach the threshold that would, it's called, what have I heard? Throwing good money after bad.
That's right.
You have to hire a lawyer who'd be more expensive than the eventual outcome. And some people just say, well, it's the principle of the thing. Well, when it hits the pocketbook, we see how much principle is, it still remains there. But I applaud that. I think that would be a fantastic primer, a fantastic coaching opportunity for people who really just don't know what they're doing, but they know they would need to do it. But I hope that does very well for you. Stephen, tell us a little bit more about the practice. What is your favorite type of casework to handle? What sets you apart a little bit from, I know it's a very crowded field in the Atlanta and metro Atlanta area. Tell us a little bit about your passions there with the law.
Sure. Well, it's interesting. I call myself a car lawyer, but I'm not a car guy. I'm not one of these folks that has the Car and Driver magazine delivered every month where I study it. I don't look up, I'm not a car enthusiast by any stretch. I come from a business kind of bent. My background, I got my undergrad degree in finance at the University of Illinois. And so I'm not one of these lawyers that has, a political science degree or an English degree. I come from from the business side. So for me, my practice is almost exclusively devoted, outside of the coaching piece, is devoted to representing businesses. It's a lot of balance sheet decisions that businesses have to make on when they're dealing with consumer matters or even state investigations or employment issues. It's how is this going to affect my bottom line, which, some people that rubs the wrong way, but that's just the reality of owning a business and running a business, is how do these decisions affect the business moving forward? So that's an in-depth analysis that I take with my clients with every case and every matter and every dispute. It's not about, do we fight it to fight it? Like you said, throwing good money after bad in a lot of cases, or the principle of the matter. I make sure to focus really heavily with my clients on, is this the right decision for the future? Attorneys are, I like to think of my cases and my clients that I'm not working for today's case, I'm working for tomorrow's case with a lot of my clients. A lot of my clients are repeat clients. It's not one-off cases, like an injury case or a divorce where you hope it doesn't happen again. These are corporate clients that have ongoing matters. And so when I talk with them about, when I develop the relationship with my clients, it's speaking about these cases in a business sense and what's going to make the most sense for the business, because again, it's about the future cases. I don't want them to make a decision today that's going to screw up the business later and to affect the decision making later. I don't want them to look back and go, oh, we should have done that a different way than we did. And so that's a high focus of mine. And I go, I'm going to vomit up information for a minute, but I do a lot of work in the car industry, as I said before. So I've got a very close relationship here in Georgia with the Georgia Independent Auto Dealer Association, which is the association for independent dealers here in Georgia. Those are brokers, those are used car sales, any non-franchise. A franchise dealership, of course, is, Bernard Nomberg Kia or whatever, that would be a franchise dealer. But, Bernard Nomberg's used cars on the corner lot there would be one of these independent dealers. And in fact, Georgia is the largest market for used cars in the country, believe it or not. Bigger than New York, bigger than California, bigger even than Texas. And a lot of that has to do with Savannah and the port and how we ship vehicles all over the world from the port of Savannah. A lot of that has to do with the size of Atlanta and the metropolitan area and just the way transportation here works. It's not quite as robust as, say, Boston or New York or Chicago in the transportation system, for public transportation. So it's a big industry here in Georgia that a lot of people don't really recognize or don't know about. So I'm able to really hone in there.
I can see that. Us Southerners, we love our cars, and we're so used to that independence of getting in a car and driving across the state for whatever or whatever. And I get it. Up in the Northeast, they have much more accessible public transportation, and it's a mindset that you're not going to have a car if you're in downtown Manhattan necessarily. You're going to take the subway or the train, et cetera. We're, with us, I guess, entering now into the recession and still in the pandemic and all of the chaos that's going on, Steve, it must be, and so many businesses lately announcing filing for bankruptcy. You may, if you hadn't already, you may have to start brushing up on your bankruptcy laws or have somebody in-house that you can rely on, because it just seems what you may have been advising your business clients a year ago, sure isn't going to be the same picture 6 months to a year from now. So that must keep you on your toes.
Oh, no question about it. There's a lot of hold on to what you've got advice right now, especially in this industry, because the cars are a discretionary purchase in a lot of cases. I mean, the type of car, folks need transportation to get to work, but as far as do they need leather seats or will cloth seats work, how they make purchasing decisions changes. Right. But I do think that, and I'm not an economist and I don't study up on all this too much. But I have been advising my clients that at least in my opinion, you're going to have a very, very big summer to fall buying season for vehicles, as folks, who have qualified for the government assistance and for these loans and have now filed their tax returns. I mean, March is brutal because March, April, they call it tax season in the car business, because that's when folks who normally wouldn't have down payment money get tax returns, and then they get their refund. They get a lump sum check that they don't usually get throughout the year, and they can now go put it as a down payment to a vehicle. And so that was, the timing of this was awful for a lot of my clients, but I think it will come for those that can make it. It'll come around.
Well, if traditionally March, April in the car industry was a good time for them, with the deadlines being pushed back to, I think, mid-July now, July 15th,
Right.
that maybe that shifts back a few months the way the car industry looks at these kind of things. But that's just also so interesting because there's so many moving parts with the change in our economy, with us not really fully having a handle on COVID-19, and every state has its own versions of rolling out back into society. Who knows what September, October, November are going to look like from that standpoint? I don't know if the numbers are going to go back up. You keep hearing if there's going to be a rebound of this, and we may be right back where we were from 2 months ago. Certainly don't hope that occurs, but it must really keep you watching the news on how to handle your clients.
No, 100%, 100%. And I've done, when Governor Kemp here in Georgia issued his shelter in place order, I put together a YouTube video where I went through the whole order. It took 25 minutes to go line by line. And it had, I haven't checked recently, but it had maybe 800 or 900 views or so, which for me is a lot. My videos don't usually hit that many views. But clients want to know, and they want to know, what's going on, what's changing. And it's happening so fast, Bernard, that it's almost hard to keep. It's hard enough for lawyers to keep up with what's going on. It's got to be brutally difficult for our clients who are not well versed in reading these kinds of executive orders and in understanding what can I do, what can't I do, how many people can I have in my lot or in my business, what kind of sanitation measures do I have to put in place, all of these things that are, they're changing weekly in many cases. And so I feel for a lot of business owners who, they have enough on their plate, right, than to handle this too.
If we were talking about the restaurant industry or grocery stores, it's remarkable. I've only been in a grocery store, I think, about 2 or 3 times in the last 3 months. I don't like, it's just me. I just don't like being in those spaces right now. I'll get back to it. I went to my first restaurant this past weekend, but it was outdoors. There was no table anywhere near us. It was, but you're right. I think all of these businesses are trying to figure out what's the best practices for everybody and still to be able to survive. But Steve, I want to pivot a little bit, and I want to head toward your podcast and get away from the law as we've been talking about it. And for those of you just joining us, or maybe watching this on replay later on, I'm talking with Atlanta attorney Steven Lefkoff, and we've been talking about a little bit about his practice, business related, particularly in the car industry. But he also has this really cool podcast and Facebook group that really doesn't focus on the law, but it involves lawyers. Tell us about the genesis of this. Where'd you get this idea, and where are you going with it?
So it was back in, I want to say November or early December of last year. I was, it's funny, I was driving to a lawyer networking event in Atlanta, and I was listening to, I want to say it was the Max Law podcast, most likely. But it was one of these, attorney podcasts where they were talking about SEO or growth or how to, improve your marketing. And I was just kind of dawned on me, that we hear a lot about that in our industry,
Mm-hmm.
especially in these circles, right? Of folks who really want to grow their practice and want to do all these big and great things with their law firm. And I thought to myself, well, what do these people do outside of their firm, right? That's all we talk about is, you go to networking events and it's, so what's been going on? Oh, I got this great case and I settled this other case. I'm like, oh, please. Like, that's fantastic. I'm glad for you. I'm going to keep referring cases to you. You're a good friend, whatever.
You're the greatest lawyer in the world.
But what, like, I mean, my dad, I will tell you a quick little aside. My father's an attorney here in Atlanta, and my dad and mom met while my dad was in law school. And my mom tells this story all the time where she refused to go to law school parties. And she wouldn't go because she said all they did was talk about their courses and their professors and all this stuff that she would say, I have no interest in. I don't take any of those classes. I'm not, what job offer did you get from what big firm in Atlanta,
Right.
Whatever. She didn't care about any of that stuff. And so that's kind of resonated with me. I mean, I shouldn't say I don't care about it. It's obviously very important, but I was thinking in the car, what do these people do when they're not lawyering? Right? When we're not talking about this stuff. I said, I'm going to find out. And so I kind of made it a little mission of mine to start this podcast where I interview attorneys around the country. I'm looking for one around the world. Haven't left America yet, but I'm sure that'll come soon enough, about things that they do that are not lawyering, that are not running their practice, that are not trials in court, that's not advising clients, that's not, sending postcards or billboard marketing or phone number, vanity phone numbers or any of that business. Mm-hmm. It's really, what do you do? What are your hobbies? What are your interests as a person and with your family or individually that does not involve the practice of law?
Mm-hmm. It makes the attorneys more relatable to the non-attorneys of the world who traditionally have seen them, the traditional advertising on billboards or TV. They're holding a briefcase. They're in a suit. They're with other lawyers. They're looking very lawyerly, talking about lawyerly things. Well, who can relate to that? The average person can't. They know they may need a lawyer, but it becomes intimidating to talk to those people. And what I think you're doing, I think it breaks down that barrier. I think it makes people so much more relatable. And lawyers with lives, I think, is just a great topic. Tell us some of the activities from some of your guests that have really struck a chord with you.
There have been some really interesting ones. Everything. Well, I had you on, and we talked about baseball card collecting, which I thought was awesome. Something I haven't done in years, but really kind of brought me back to my childhood, which was really fun.
My apologies to your wife when she sees the bills, but it is a fun hobby.
Since our episode, I feel like card collecting has exploded. Some of the values of these things have gone crazy.
It has. I can send you a bunch of articles, but what it is it's people who are used to spending their money on sports, going to sports, betting on sports, attending games, and it's built into their lifestyle. They can't do that right now, but they still have the money. They want to be involved in sports in somehow, and that has exploded the sports card market in the last 2 months.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
But we've talked, I mean, I've had guests on, we've talked about watercolor painting, which is something I know absolutely nothing about. Disc golf, which is something I know, again, nothing about. I had the last episode that dropped earlier this week was on financial wealth management from an attorney who pivoted from his legal law practice into wealth management. I've got episodes dropping. So, we've done hiking, cooking, baking. I have one coming soon on treasure hunting, which is really interesting. There's an attorney who is his hobby is an interest is in treasure hunting, which I didn't think was a thing, but it is definitely a thing.
Very cool.
So they really run the gamut. From scuba diving was one. There have been a number. I mean, we're up to, I think, about 20 episodes now have been released. They come out every Monday morning. And the Facebook group we'll talk about in a minute, I'm sure, but that's been really, really fun. But they something about lawyers, maybe it's the type A personality, but I've learned that through this, that when many attorneys get into something, they really get into something.
Mm-hmm.
These are not dabblers, right? These are not folks that just, oh, I tried to cook a steak once and it turned out pretty good, and that's my hobby. No. These are folks that are like, they're fascinated about the cut of the meat and the way it's cooked, and they've done it 300 different times. And I might be speaking about myself here, but my episode will drop eventually. But that's been the coolest part to me about all this, is I'm talking to experts. I feel like they have like a level of expertise in these hobbies that I don't have in their hobby for sure, but that most people wouldn't normally have. And so they're able to drop knowledge that's really, really cool.
Well, if we ever get to have the Max Law Con conference again in person in St. Louis, you're going to have more subjects to choose from people who you meet at that conference. It'll fill up your next year's worth of Lawyers with Lives. So I applaud that. I really enjoy listening to those episodes. So please keep doing them. They really are nice to listen to, particularly when you're driving across the state, like I used to, pre-pandemic. But let's also talk about the Facebook group, because I think it's Friday mornings, you post roll calls. So talk about that a little bit, because I think that's just even another cool thing that you've come up with.
So I think the first thing to note on all of this is that I'm doing it because it's fun for me. Mm-hmm. And it puts a smile on my face.
You wouldn't be doing it otherwise.
No, this is not a revenue generator. It's not a sponsored podcast. I don't have, I actually edit it myself on GarageBand on my own computer. This is not some like big production. I do it because I'm genuinely interested in the people and in what people do. So I started the Facebook group. It's Lawyers with Lives. For anyone that's interested in joining the group, it's a fun little spot where we talk about different hobbies and things that are going on. And I started to think, well, how can I get engagement in the group and even grow more about, what are you doing? Even if it's not a particular hobby, what's going on in your life? And so every Friday, I try to do it in the morning, but sometimes it happens later. I post a roll call question, and it's ranged from, what's your favorite breakfast item? And then I went through that whole 1 week. It was breakfast, then snack, then lunch, then dinner. So that filled up a month worth of roll calls.
Yeah.
Last week was, what's the last thing you did outside that made you sweat? With the caveat being PG-13,
right.
or less. But there are things like that, like fun stuff that get folks thinking. And hopefully when group members respond, they've got a little smile on their face thinking about that. It's never a negative question or anything that would intend to drum up, negative sentiment. And there have been recently some political responses to some of these questions, like what did you do outside to sweat? Well, there were a few people that said they protested, right, and marched in some of these marches. So, I'm all cool with that. I want to hear what you're doing, and if that makes you happy, then so be it. Who am I to judge what makes people happy?
In both of those things that you're doing, the podcast and the Facebook group, are really at such a perfect timing. It's such a heavy world and a heavy burden everyone is carrying. It's kind of like the reason why I do these TikToks with my kids. It's just, and we always put in there, it's a hashtag made you smile. And you're right, it's a little bit of levity that the world needs. It's just to put a smile on your face and maybe put a little funny comment or response. But I certainly applaud both of those efforts. I hope they continue. It seems like they're both getting some momentum, and folks are finding it. And I'm going to put links. I put a link to your website in the show notes, but I'm going to put a link to both the podcast and to the Facebook group, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we get out of here, I know your father practices law just like our father did for years till he retired. And as you may know, we grew up in Dothan, in the Circle City, down southeast part of Alabama on the way to the beach. It's the last place for bad traffic and fried foods.
It's so true.
Before you hit the Florida line. Well, Dad's happily retired over in Gulf Shores. And David, my business partner and youngest brother, we had contemplated at times going to Dothan and partnering with Dad, but ultimately we thought that Birmingham was a better fit for us. Do you and your dad practice together? Have you ever practiced? How's that dynamic?
So we don't. And we went, I wouldn't say we ever practiced together. I interned with him over a summer. And his practice here, which he started in 92, is a creditor's bankruptcy firm. And so speaking of bankruptcy, we share a lot of very similar clients. We share a lot of clients where he does the bankruptcy, his firm does bankruptcy, and I do the litigation and general counsel piece to a lot of clients. But I mean, he knows this, I'll be honest with you, that it was, bankruptcy is very monotonous to me. It was a lot of, especially on the creditor side, you're doing you're reviewing plans, you're drafting up objections, but it's there are hundreds of cases and they're all pretty much the same and they're negotiated and then it's over. And so I just got kind of bored with it, to be honest with you. And it just wasn't for me. So that's why we don't practice together. Our offices are half mile from each other in different buildings, and we live 10 minutes from each other. So we're very, very close.
I was going to say, you basically are of counsel to each other as it is. But
we get each
right.
other's mail. It's sometimes I get mail for his firm and he gets mail for my firm because of the last names.
Sure. And maybe the same street or same zip code. But that's interesting because I know lots of multi-generation law practices and they work well and everybody is good. And then there's other reasons, has nothing to do with personality types or problems in the family. It's just don't want to do that type of work. And I get it. It wasn't an easy decision for either me or David not to go to Dothan and practice with Dad, but he's now of counsel with us. We talk to him all the time and he likes to keep, a little bit of knowledge of what's going on and the good cases or the interesting legal matters. And I cherish his input. You can't replace over 50 years of legal knowledge.
Right. I see that happening, hopefully, with me. When he retires, he's already said he wants to come work for me, and he said he'll be my cheapest employee.
Excellent. Well, Steven, I sure appreciate your time this morning. This has been a lot of fun for me. I hope that you found it tolerable for you.
No doubt, Bernard. Thank you for having me on. This is fun, man. This is absolutely a blast.
Absolutely. This is why I do these conversations every week, and we're going to continue to do it. We've got them scheduled out through the rest of the summer and hopefully beyond. And you never know. 1 week it's with an attorney in Atlanta, and next week it could be the athletics director at a Power 5 school or a yoga instructor. You never know from week to week. But I want to thank everybody for your continued support. The comments are great. The input is awesome. And Nomberg Law Live will continue to keep going on Tuesdays at 10 o'clock Central. So guys, I hope you have a great rest of your week. We are going to get through this pandemic. You just got to continue to be patient, use common sense, do the right thing. I know summer is here basically, and folks just want to get out and do, but please just be mindful that everybody is taking this a little bit differently. Thank you, guys. Y'all be well.